focus on a couple of articles if we're going
Yeah.
to speak about. Yeah.
Welcome
Okay.
to the Spy Guy Geopolitical panel for Friday, the 23rd, January 23rd. We're recording here with David S., and we're hoping to have a few more people stop on by. I've even reached out to Michael, but he's very hard to get a hold of. And, of course, Wasserman says he'll be long shortly. And we were just having a very interesting conversation about radicalization, which is actually interesting because I was just, before we started the show, I was watching a program from Crypto Rich and Ian Burlingham. And Ian Burlingham was talking about how X has been designed, it seems to be designed or to radicalize young men, especially. And Dave's here talking about how he's going on X Spaces and he's just getting shouted down by all sorts of radicals out there. And it does seem like he says either Elon Musk is wanting that, and that does not seem to be Elon's style, or there's Ian Burlingham's assertion is that there is a very sophisticated attempt, to, a lot of money and a lot of power behind it, to use X and probably other social media platforms to radicalize young men for what I have been suspecting for a little while now is the next World War III like environment.
We're already in the World War III next World War III environment.
Yeah.
Let me remind you, I'm going to speak a lot on the Middle East now today in Israel and the relation with the Trump administration, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And most Jewish traditional establishment constructs in the United States and Israeli social media have become virulently anti-Trump, maybe even worse than they were towards Biden, because Biden was a traditional guy that did some really terrible things. Well, he didn't do anything, but Obama did some really terrible things. Trump is trying to stabilize the Middle East and finally make a change to this never-ending British chaos theory, and it is creating an absolute meltdown. But if you go back to before World War One, so when it was a little bit like World War II, you had a pretty good economy, but the financial crisis of all this same thing, over immigration, complete inequality, as we have today, hit in the second part of the first decade of the 20th century, and the economy got to the point where Britain could no longer expand enough to keep up, and then you had Germany looking for their, and I will quote, place in the sun, and the Kaiser was expanding his sea fleet, and in the midst of all this, the tensions were rising, and when tensions rise, people always focus on Archduke Ferdinand, but anybody from Richard Poe to anybody else will say that it's just a spark. When you have a forest that is ripe for a forest fire, this just happened in southern Argentina, and they're blaming the Jews. The guy had some toilet paper, went to the bathroom, and somehow the toilet paper caught on fire. Not even in a shed, in an outhouse, but that forest fire then created, the sparks created a tremendous forest fire. So if it wasn't Arch Ferdinand, it would be Archduke Ferdinand, would have been somebody else.
Yeah.
Now, what happened when that happened is that there was no war for I believe, a couple of months, maybe 2 months,
2 or 3
60
months.
days. I don't think 90 days. Yeah. What did Britain do during that period? They started a war fervor, and they got all these 14-year-old kids, because in those days, 13 and 14-year-olds were fine to go out and get slaughtered. But Wilfred Owen wrote this, how do you say, lachrymous or lugubrious poetry later on about all these young teens going out to get killed, which today is illegal, but if there was a war, they would do it again in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
And they would, and they made such an enthusiasm for this. We saw this in Ukraine with all the pioneering camps that Alex Grainer talked about. You make pioneering camps. You make people joyful. war was going to be an adventure for bored kids that did not have, their families didn't have enough funds to give them proper entertainment. And the entertainment in those days wasn't video games. It was going out to the park, playing football, enjoying. You don't have to have any of these things you have today. But when the grind is so great for the lower middle classes, as it is right now, by the way, in England, it's very similar in England right at the moment. It's a very despondent economy for the majority. We don't see it when we go to central London, but the rest of it's in pretty bad shape. So you create this war fervor, not by calling it war and you're going to get killed, but it's this great adventure. And you didn't have social media at the time. Now you have social media and you have a new way of whipping up anger and hatred and wanting to go to war and people shouting total victory. Whoever shouts total victory, history, at least recorded history, since the time of recording, telenews, radio, generally the people that shout total victory rarely get total victory.
Right.
Maybe you'll disagree, but that's how I see it.
Mhm.
So I'll get into that in a second, but we're seeing a lot of similarities to that period between, Archduke Ferdinand and the actual beginning of the prosecution of the war, which took several months. And that's what we're seeing on social media, and it is extremely alarming.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't see it getting better. Now, one of the worst is actually my own people, the Jewish people in Israel, in that Israel has a government now with a prime minister that is barking total victory ad nauseum, something he never used to do.
Right.
Well, was a supporter of that prime minister for about 30 years now. Uh, the whole thing about October 7th is the same as Archduke Ferdinand. There were factors out there that were, everything from regime change inside Israel, due in part to economic imbalances, and due to the Likud extreme liberal policy, many different cases. You were getting more and more inequality in the neighboring areas, in the Palestinian areas, some say the Yehuda Shomron areas, in Jordan, because of the general financial crisis, especially in Turkey, where it's almost unaffordable to live right now. If you and I go there, it's even more expensive than Argentina. So you have all this going on. Hamas was feeling that they were becoming completely irrelevant. You had the British desperately looking to stop Russian energy from reaching Germany. Now, all these don't sound like they're related, but they are related. So when you have that many factors going on, it was inevitable that something somewhere was going to happen. And I think we both watched Alex McCourris. I remember when McCourris said when China came and made that rapprochement agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and Biden was in power, that the United States will lean uh, mercilessly on Israel, and they did. So we saw this regime change against Netanyahu, the Biden regime supporting that regime change. We saw an increase in training with paragliders, both in Jordan and in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
We saw all these things happening. Every single morning, there were, if you want to look at it from a sonata allegro form in classical music, you had a crescendo of the leitmotifs. First, you had a mini intifada. After the mini intifada, you had a different type of intifada that Israel has not experienced in the past, and that was urban intifada in Israeli cities. Didn't last long, but one had to take note. Then all of a sudden, you had this set up in a city right on the Israeli border with the West Bank. I think it was Tulkarm or Jenin. I'm not sure which one of the two. And you had this Al Jazeera American reporter that went there and got killed.
Mhm.
Now, it's easy to say that the IDF was responsible, but I could make a counter argument that if I was the Lions Brigade, which is a radical group such as Hamas, I would want to martyr somebody to blame it on Israel and raise the tensions. Then there were problems on the Temple Mount. And in the midst of all this came the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which basically was a absolute red threat to Hamas. Their funding because uh, Israel was getting very close to signing an agreement with Saudi Arabia, and that would be a killer. So, if you put all these things together, it was clear that something was going to happen, and then things got very quiet. And then Netanyahu went to Santa Clara, did a 3 hour YouTube podcast with Elon Musk, beamed it to Saudi Arabia, whose foreign minister is aligned with King Salman, or some people call him King Salman the Wise, who did not want relations with Israel. And King and the foreign minister all of a sudden start talking. We are very close now to signing with Israel. Uh, and then that was followed immediately thereafter by a huge meeting in the United Nations publicly between Israel and Turkey, where Turkey laid down its conditions for a doubling of trade in return for the one of the principal pipelines of the Eastern Mediterranean gas group, which as a Canadian you should be familiar with,
Mhm.
instead of going through Cyprus, would go through Mersin,
Mhm.
which is, if you know where that is, it's not too far from the Inchikuk, the Inchikuk Air Base.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, if I was Yahya Sinwar, I would say this is enough that I need to strike now.
Mhm.
I mean, all these cumulative things, but Israel went to sleep. And October 7th happened. And again, people can argue that if you try to blame the government for any culpability at all, you're a traitor, you're an anti Semite, you're a court juicer, you're whatever. But the fact is, it did happen on this government's watch. And nobody in the world can say that it didn't happen on this government's watch.
Mhm.
You can take 100 different opinions, but it happened on this government's watch. So don't expect any inquiries that are going to be serious. So, what was the natural reaction? To get hostile, to get nasty, to get aggressive, to shout total victory. And then Israel, out of nowhere, got a victory. Complete loss in Gaza. Oh, we won in Gaza. No, you didn't. No, we didn't win in Gaza. I don't see any win in Gaza.
Mhm.
So Israel got a complete victory with the end of what the majority press called the axis of resistance, and I always called it the axis of militias, which basically the way Iran operates. Iran knows that they are a second-rate power. They're not a first-rate power. Whatever all these people like Larry Johnson, Scott Ritter, and all these people say that Iran is the pillar of the multipolar world, along with Russia and China. That's a joke. It's not.
Yeah.
It supplies China, and it has crucial railroad and trade routes through it. That's it.
They have a few other things going for them, but one of the
Oh, they're a
things.
very intelligent country. They're a wonderful country, but I'm saying to call them a as all the and I hate to use this word, Israel and Jew haters on to pander to their audiences, which unfortunately almost all of them are anti-Israel because of Israel's relations with the states and the brilliance of the left, the Palestinian media, the Arab media, the Intifada media, which goes far beyond the Palestinians to paint Israel as the worst child killers since Attila the Hun. when the
Yeah.
Emirates just killed 10 times as many. Um, and they wanted to create that this is a joke. Okay, but what Iran has done is they understand very well what they are capable of doing.
Mm.
So just like other countries, including Israel,
Mm.
they have built up an access of proxies. Israel
Correct.
also has their proxies,
Mm.
especially the Kurds.
Oh yeah.
And to recently, the Druze. I mean, they've tried with the Yazidis, they haven't gotten anywhere because there's nothing to get to.
Mm.
But Israel has always built up minority proxies against the Sunni majority. I am somebody who favors Israel having relations with the Sunni majority. A lot of times, if you look at history, proxies certainly do work to weaken a core state. I think in history we've seen this many times. But what we've also seen in history is that these same proxies, and I think we saw this more maybe with the end of the Roman Empire with the Goths
Mm.
than anything else, eventually those proxies get big enough and they swallow up their feeding supplier. I mean, can you think of periods of that in history?
Of course. As you said, the Goths or the Vandals, when they finally said, why don't we just run Rome ourselves? Why are we working for these other losers over here?
And that is the danger when you create proxies, because, and then I'm going to get to the article I want to discuss today.
Hmm.
I'm a great fan of Syria, and I'm more of a fan of Syria-Israel relations. And I'm very impressed with the new leader because he's made all the right moves. Very battle-hardened, came from a rough beginning because he decided to join the radical groups for a while. He actually started to modulate away from them after about 4 or 5 years and became completely under the United States and Turkish influence because I think he could see that this is all fine and dandy, but they're not going anywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
that these are going to end. I think the reason he went away from Al Qaeda and then formed Jabhat al Nusra, which Israel supported as a proxy for quite a while.
Yep.
We don't mention that, of course. Uh, is that I think that some of these guys have a vision because he comes from a political animal family. Now, if you want to take Al Qaeda, the original Al Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, Dr. Zawahiri from Egypt, these are not political animals. One was a doctor, the other was an economist, the other had. So uh, they were actually, even though they were Islamists and quite radical Islamists and probably knew every hadith in the Quran by memory, but still they were academics. A
Mhm.
lot of the Palestinian groups over the years that did terrible things were academics. We always call these people head choppers, but the people at the very top, especially if you look at the various Palestinian groups,
Mm.
are academics.
Correct.
Ahmed al-Sharar is not an academic. He's a guy in the field that learns a little bit like some of our generals, Viscount Montgomery, Rommel, Sun Sen, where trends are going. And so I don't think he just randomly woke up one day and said, I've had enough of Al Qaeda and I'm going somewhere else. I think the Americans were watching him. I think that the Turks were watching him, and they realized that this kind of, you know, uh, Daesh and ISIS, this couldn't go on forever.
Right.
So he's been training for a long time. And I always say in Israel, the Jabotinskyists couldn't go on forever either. I mean, the Stern Gang could not go on forever either.
Hmm.
And the head of the Stern Gang became, at least in my view, possibly the best prime minister that Israel ever had.
Hmm.
But it did not erase that he was the head of the Stern Gang at
Yeah.
one point. So basically, the reason they hate Al Qaeda is Israel thought they could basically take proxies and turn them into states,
Hmm.
misunderstanding that there is a reason why Turkey in general, but especially Erdogan, despises the Kurds. But he also made good relations. The Kurds today have their own state de facto, and that's called Erbil, northern Iraq,
Right.
which Saddam at one time gave them autonomy as well. I don't know if you're aware of that.
No, I was not.
Okay, but he did. He was the only Arab leader to give autonomy to the Kurds. Whatever happened later was another story. So he gave autonomy to the Kurds. And then Erdogan created a state out of the ruins of the 2003 war with Iraq, which I was completely against, and I still am.
Same here.
Pardon me?
I said same here. I was against that war. I thought it was just dumb. I was just like, why are we doing this? You haven't won.
It also created. Yeah, well, it also created 2-3 million dead people.
Oh yeah.
The argument that what we euphemistically call the neocon movement made, starting as early as 1991, when George Bush Sr. wanted to show Russia and the rest of the world that there's a new sheriff in town. Those were exactly his words. Was that we have a limited amount of time, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, and we want to establish the American century, the American dominant century, which means that you follow Fukuyama and everything becomes a liberal democracy that we control, and there is no room for competition because our system is so much better. So a lot of these wars that you saw, the neocon wars, that really didn't start with 1991, that was a separate thing, but starting with Yugoslavia onward, a lot of what we were seeing was this idea that China will become an emerging power within 10 to 15 years, and they turned out to be right. There is always a possibility of a Russian resurgence, a possibility. They didn't think it was great, but they understood there could be a Russia resurgence. And then there was a third possibility of a charismatic Islamic leader, or let's say Turkey itself, which is always on the verge or on the cusp of being a superpower, but never quite makes it. But because of their strategic location, because of their ethnic mix, their ethnic background of European, of fierce Mongolians, fierce Ural-Altaics, they had the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire lasted a long time and was extremely successful. Now, if you had a successful empire like the Ottomans, there are many Ottomans that very few of us ever discuss. Who discusses today the Seljuk Empire?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are many people discussing the Seljuk Empire? I doubt it.
Celtic? You mean the Celtic?
No, the Celtic. It was another one of the Seljuks. It's one of the Arab empires.
Oh, okay.
And then you have another empire that was huge that was centered around Morocco. I mean, the territory went down all the way to today's Nigeria. It was absolutely tremendous. Nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
People do pay respects to the Mongolian Empire because they conquered Russia and they had the biggest land mass of any empire in history. But that's about as far as it goes. But the Ottomans still lives very much in the European and Western psyche.
Correct.
Because that Ottoman Empire still hangs on that psyche, Russia can't do much about it because Russia and the Ottomans have always fought each other and they always will.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've always aligned and then fought each other again. That's their history. But in terms of Europe, in terms of the West, in terms of the, shall we say, colonialist powers, the Ottoman Empire was the thorn to them because it was their empire. A successful empire lasted, was it 600 years, 500 years, 600 years?
Something like that.
And Erdogan wants to recreate that. Now, I'm going to guess that even in the mind of Ataturk, who was 100% pro-Europe, groomed, taught, indoctrinated in Europe,
Made the
Even
Fez
someone with a
legal, and
personality,
he, he
even a
made the Fez
personality like
illegal
Ataturk,
and
would,
made it a
yeah.
death penalty offense to wear the Fez.
Yeah, but I mean, Turkey is a threat to the Western world order, and that they have the ability. Now, ironically, Turkey and Israel were the best of partners and allies for years because there was a time when the West was beating up on Turkey and beating up on Israel equally. Well, I've
I
got a
know.
surprise for you. They're still beating up on Turkey and still beating up on Israel equally. It's never stopped.
Yeah. No, that's quite clear.
So, what has happened, however, is that the paranoia in Israel about an Islamic Turkey
Mm.
has been ingrained, even though I remember in the very beginning, during Erdogan's early years, he came to Israel, he bought weapons, he would send his generals there. The trade went to the sky.
Mhm.
Flights, still they're trying to get their flights back. Tourism, the number one tourism spot for Israel for a long time was, guess where? Antalya.
Mm.
So basically, Erdogan at one point decided to take up the Palestinian cause for whatever reason. I don't know the reason. I don't think it was a wise reason, but he decided to take it up. And then he got hooked on it, and then his ships got fired on by Israel in the Mamara. It was only 2 years earlier than that Erdogan was trying to do the same thing that the United States is trying to do right now: make peace between Israel and Syria,
Mhm.
which would be the best thing for Israel that ever happened. And that's why I can't go on social media, because they think, this jihadist, this, that. But nobody thought that al-Sharaa would last even a year. Not only did he last a year, but in 1 year, he unified Syria with almost no outside help.
Mhm.
Think about it. Not going to say he had none, but he had very, very little. And that's an accomplishment. All he did in the last few days was take back Syria's wheat, Syria's oil, and Syria's other resources in the northeast. They never belonged to Kurdish proxies. Those Kurdish proxies were put there by the Turks and by the Americans. Kurdish proxies were put there. Nothing to do with the Kurdish state. But Israel felt so threatened by having an Islamist coming in because of the wake of October 7th that
Mhm.
they wanted to create this fierce axis of militias and cut the country up into four pieces and have a surrounded caliphate in Damascus, surrounded by all these tough proxies. I mean, it's really fantastical what
Mhm.
they wanted. Now, the Kurds are very, very tough fighters. So
Oh,
are the
of course.
Druze.
Mhm.
All right. Now, it's not a matter whether I favor them, whether I don't favor them. They're extremely tough fighters, but they are also a risk to the Arabs and even to the Iranians for another reason. Number one, they're extremely tough fighters, and they do get support always from the outside. They are like janissaries. They are a disruptive force, not because they want to be a disruptive force, but that's one of the ways that they've survived all these years. I think that Erdogan and the Kurds made a mistake not working more to solidify Erbil, to enlarge the entire Kurdish region of Iraq, and basically taking it for their own country. If you go there, you don't need a visa to go to Iraq. They have their own passport stamps. They have every makings of their own state, and the Iraqis have left them alone. Tremendous oil, tremendous resources. All they had to do is build on that. My theory is that the West wanted them to remain proxies outside of um, the legal or political Kurdistan, and that when you have a history of being a proxy, old habits die hard. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. No.
And remember that one of the unwritten things is in the Armenian massacre, or the Armenian, whatever they want to call the Armenian thing. Hello, Wasserman.
Hello.
Um,
Hey, my goodness.
in the Armenian massacre, The Kurds also did that. They also participated on behalf of the Turks. Then, of course, don't dare say that. So it didn't make any sense whatsoever. Uh, you have a demographic problem in Turkey. There are more Kurds being born than Turks. It's a disruptive force. Erdogan, just like Netanyahu, is on of his bad heels, not on his good heels. And the one thing Turkey will not tolerate is a Kurdish state in the heart of Turkey, in the heart of physical Turkey.
Right.
That they will go to war, no matter what. They'll go to
Yeah.
war against Israel over that. They'll go to war against Iran. They'll go to war against the United States. They'll kick NATO out. That is the one red line that neither Erdogan and I doubt even Imamoglu will cross. They were willing to give the Kurds autonomy in Diyarbakir and other states to have self-governance. The same has been proposed by Syria. But to make a separate state is a dagger in the heart of Turkey. That, I believe, is the one line that Erdogan will do anything to prevent. Maybe you disagree with me. I don't know. It'd be interesting to get your.
No, I think the Kurdish problem in Turkey and for Iran and for everyone else in that area is well known, and people are very much about not letting the Kurds have their own state.
Well, but that's not true. The Kurds do have their own state, but they don't have it in the location that they want it. They have it in Erbil, which is a Kurdish area.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, there is this obsession that, I mean, the dream that the Israelis think, because they think all minorities are good and all Sunnis are bad, or cartoonish nonsense, is that everybody is a jihadi and everybody wants to kill the West and we're the vanguard of the West. I'm so tired of hearing all about it. The Kurds are a very large population. They're not as small. So if you look at their demographics, they definitely are big enough to support a real state. Unlike the Druze that have no capability
the Druze
of having an actual state. Unlike the Yazidis. Unlike, I don't know how many other people we could come up with.
I don't think the Yazidis want a state. They just want to be left alone.
Well, okay, but why are they not left alone? Because the West and all these other people use them, again, to be disruptors in the region. If they were just left alone in the area, mostly they would be left alone. I don't say entirely. Mm-hmm. So the Kurds, however, and much more than Israel, they're much, much bigger than Israel. Mm-hmm. Israel got their states by sheer, I won't want to say luck, by sheer grit and by sheer circumstance and by sheer never letting go and having
and
money.
Also the fact that this is British Empire City of London policy to create minorities and places to screw with people.
Well, that's the whole point. And so what did the Israelis do that made the mistake? They understood what the British were doing, mm-hmm. and they were patient enough to ride that British thing, and now they're having a problem getting rid of them. But they were able to do that. Sometimes you have a host, and then you have to throw your host off. By the way, we in the United States threw our British off. The very same thing, didn't we?
Not necessarily, depending on who you talk to.
But I don't think the British did well. I mean, if you look at the Civil War, you understand the British have never really left. And
right.
If you look at elements in the Israeli elites, the British have not left either.
Right.
Now, I wouldn't mind if Alex Craner would say that, but then he follows it up with all this Jew-hating stuff and anti-Semitic. So let me go to this article, if I may, that I think was written very well. It was by an Arab guy. I don't know where he comes from. Ibrahim Majid.
Well, just at the critical moment, too.
What's that?
I said you froze up just at the critical moment.
That is David. He has frozen up on us. So what have you been up to this week, Wasserman, while David is quiet for a moment?
I have been fiendishly working away, launching launching 2 applications, actually. So
I'm glad some people have a business. I wish I could make. One guy accused me today of being an Islamist shill. supporting Syria. And I wrote back, I said, you know what? I would love that. Where can I get a check?
That's right.
You know, can you please tell me where I can go to get $1,000 a month?
Mm.
You know, I mean, it is so ludicrous. So,
Oh, wait a minute.
all right, so
You give me a crazy idea, David. So you're the arbitrage specialist. I wonder if there's any way to arbitrage the difference of information flow between the rabidly pro-Islamic and the rabidly pro-Jewish.
it's almost impossible. And the reason why is simply you're dealing with the younger generation. How do you arbitrage between people that are fanatics that are reinforced? One of the things that social media does is to reinforce the view they want you to have in live time, real time, for every single minute that you're on social media. And they do it in a way to basically rev people up that when they get off of social media, it doesn't recede. So
Yeah.
yes, it probably could be done, but it's much more sophisticated than we think it is.
Oh yeah, it wasn't. It's crazy sophisticated, but it made me laugh for a moment. It was a crazy idea.
By the way, we have a very interesting phenomena coming to the East Coast this weekend. Apparently, in the New York area, it's going to be one of the coldest weekends in a few years, from what I understand.
I was told in my
And
particular branch it would be the coldest of the decade.
Haven't we been
Okay,
hearing
well,
that every year for the last 4 or 5 years? I seem to remember Snowmageddon arriving several times over the last couple of years.
Yep.
well, here in the Southland, in Argentina, South Brazil, they are threatening the hottest temperatures on the planet for 2-3 days this weekend.
Yeah, I am
So,
back to that information flow. So actually, you're giving me ideas on the arbitrage. So maybe the arbitrage maybe the arbitrage opportunity exists in the public markets like Kalshi, where if you can identify market swings that are due to obvious misinformation, maybe that's the opportunity.
so that happens all the time.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. And look, I mean, to this day, with a little bit of reminiscence of the September incident of back in 2001, before October 7th happened, one of the most embarrassing things that if you really want to get deplatformed, this is the way to do it, is that there were massive shorts going on, both in the Israeli and New York stock markets, 2 or 3 days before October 7th. I've never checked it to verify it, but people say they can prove that there were certain shortings that took place. When you see shortings before a colossal event, it means somebody knows that something is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let me go over a little bit this article here.
Sorry, didn't you mean that some people are going to do some things?
Yeah, well, some people are going to do some things, you know.
Yeah.
So let me go over this article a little bit so we can discuss this whole Kurd and the whole Jewish meltdown and this nonsense. You were not here for the first part of this one. Me being the Jewish supporter of the Syrians.
Well, if you want to
And for
send me the
Syria.
link, I can share it to the screen so everyone can see it.
All right. So how do I do? Let me see how I can do this. Okay. So
You can put it in the
how
chat.
do I send you the link?
No one chatting. And we also have a private chat on the right there. And he's frozen up because he's accessing his link. Wow, we're up to 4 people watching right now. That's pretty good for us.
All right.
Yeah, David was complaining earlier about the fact that he can't go on X Spaces anymore because he'll just get shouted down. And one of the things I've learned, I was watching a video from Crypto Rich, and he was talking to Ian Burlingham, and Ian Burlingham was saying the same thing, that someone out there is apparently driving X to be much more radicalized, especially amongst young people. And of course, it's the lead up to the people are getting us prepped for the next World War.
The problem I have with those kinds of reports is that is that X, more than any other social platform I've ever been on, tends towards these little microcosms. And so it's very, very difficult, technically, in my opinion, to bust out of the bubble you're in. So it's the only kind of study that I would believe would be a study that did a longitudinal that they created a longitudinal sampling of different profiles that were carefully constructed to to exist within a carefully delimited and defined number of bubbles, and then we could maybe come up with something that approximated some kind of global trend. But X is so compartmentalized that I feel that any trend that anyone spots is highly localized to the community that they're in.
Oh, yeah, yes, it is. And what I've noticed is core viewers on X are way down. They're just more vocal and making more noise, including us, than they did. But it could be that the millions that were participating in the public square or town square or whatever town hall are actually diminished. So it's like in each community, you might have up to 100,000 people in any one given community. And then after that, it tapers off because it is very, very hostile. I've sent you the link. So since this is a hot topic about this whole abandonment of the courage, no, they just simply,
here I have it.
their timestamp is used up. There was no abandonment or anything. So, and by the way, proxy groups are not a nation. They're not a people. Now, if I go, I don't think I can read this. If I go off of the screen, you can you still hear me if I go off of the screen?
Well, maybe
Maybe you won't, but I will. I'm going to put it on.
Yeah.
Here it is, borderline and gambit. So here it is. If you can, I don't know if you guys can read that.
I'll zoom it up.
I can simply, there. I mean, now look. I mean, it's. Look. I mean, I wish that we had much. So what I like about this analysis is that I just think it makes common sense. So we have the borderland gamut, why Washington traded the Kurds for a shot at Tehran. Well, right here we have a very interesting situation. The Israeli government, or particularly the prime minister, who I have redubbed Captain Ahab, or maybe Captain Behab, Captain Behab, that might be actually, is so obsessed with the Moby Dick in Iran that he's willing to accept 700 hypersonic missiles into Israel to satisfy his quest for Moby Dick, or I'm sorry, Iran Dick, that demasted him. All right, so here we go. What unfolded along the Syrian, Iraqi, Turkish borderlands was neither a security incident nor a diplomatic failure. It was a deliberate realignment, cold, transactional, long in preparation. To understand the shift, he's going to come to something very interesting here in a minute. To understand the shift, one must look beyond airstrikes and the language of betrayal. There is no betrayal. Israel thinks there's a betrayal. There's no betrayal. What occurred was a calculated redistribution of territory, influence, and residual militant force, all subordinated to a single overriding objective, the strategic isolation of Iran. Well, let's stop right there. Isn't that the biggest Israeli goal that this current government has? If you would listen to them, I would think it is.
Yeah.
Are you there?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, now remember that I only have one page, so I'm going to have to tell you when to change this. Okay.
Yep.
The death of ideology. When utility replaced loyalty. First of all, what is their loyalty? I mean, I don't, In American political rhetoric, the Kurdish partnership was framed as a moral commitment. I'd prefer to say the American, Israeli, and the lobbying efforts of disparate groups, not only Jewish but Kurdish, of monarchists of all sorts. The Kurdish, because remember the axis of minorities in the Middle East. Sunnis and Arabs are bad. and any other group is good. In American political, we say the Kurdish was formed as a moral commitment. On the ground, however, alliances operate by a different logic. In the realm of power politics, loyalty is not a currency. Utility is. By the late Trump era, the Kurdish project had shifted from asset to liability. Aspirations for autonomy, quietly encouraged for years and viewed by Israeli planners as a potential second front against regional adversaries. And I'll pause right here and say these adversaries are not necessarily adversaries, but in the Israeli political mind and IDF mind, not necessarily the intelligence minds or the think tanks. They're totally different. But against regional adversaries collided directly with a far more consequential imperative, preserving the NATO-Turkey axis. So let's stop again. We hear in all these liberals, we hear it in Israel nonstop, we hear it in Iran nonstop, we hear it. Why is Turkey still in NATO? Turkey shouldn't be in NATO. Well, I agree, because I don't think NATO should exist. But if you're going to have a NATO, and they're part of basically enforcing U.S.-British policy, Germany down, Russia out, America in, definitely Turkey has to be in there. And so you have a bunch of people shouting, why is NATO? Why is that horrible Turkey in NATO? Well, because it really are the Anglos and the Americans, not some small countries, saying what should be. So I think you're right. Preserving the NATO-Turkey alliance. So what's more access? What's more important? Preserving Kurdish militias. Now, they're not even, helping the Kurds. Very, very violent militias, many of them, that basically made $20 billion or $25 billion because the Americans handed them Syrian oil and Syrian wheat to sell on the black market to undermine and destroy the Assad government. Well, they did their job. It's over. It's not yours. You've had your lease. The owner wants his property back because the owner is back in charge. Could we say that might have something to do with it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right. Here, realism prevails.
But also, why do we want Turkey in NATO? The Bosphorus Straits.
Little minor, that's just a minor. How do you call that? A minor triviality that we just barely touch on it. So, I mean, it's comical. So here, realism prevails. So Ankara's message was unambiguous. An Israeli-aligned Kurdish corridor on its southern flank constitutes a red line. Washington understood the arithmetic. A non-state proxy, however effective, could now not outweigh the strategic value of Turkey, a sovereign state with the second largest army in NATO and control over critical maritime and land choke points. Now, that's what you just said, by the way, Spy Guy. And that is why I generally don't like proxies and, little groups that are promised states that will never happen. Although, actually, the Kurds did get a state. That's the strange thing, made by Erdogan. Let's continue here. And that's another subject I'd like to delve into, is why are they not happy with the state that they have? And I think that we will discover many things, okay? So stop. Come back just a little bit. Ahmed, that's it, stop. Okay, Ahmed al-Shara's rise was therefore not ideological, not moral. It was functional. He offered what the Kurdish administration could not: a centralized authority capable of stabilizing eastern Syria without triggering a regional war. Now, I never even thought of that. And so what does he say? In classical realist terms, legitimacy was confirmed not by elections, but by the monopolization of force and the capacity to secure American interests. The Kurds did not fail Washington. They simply became too expensive to defend. Now, let me stop right here. One of the problems with John Mersheimer for the Jewish world and for some people that don't like what he stands for across the board, including the Baltic loonies like Kaja Kallas and all these other people, because he is basically for them given realism a dirty word, that it's dirty to say that you're a realist.
Yeah.
And I think that realism, for those that don't like what he has to say or doesn't like, and yes, he sometimes says things he shouldn't, but overall, realism only works when you are getting the benefit of the realism. When the realism goes against you, then it's the worst thing in the world. So, of course, the Kurds hate realism. The Israelis absolutely hate realism, even though they're realists themselves at times. The Baltics hate realism. Most of Scandinavia hates realism. But that doesn't mean that realism doesn't exist. Your thoughts, gentlemen?
I am a realist, so I think realism exists. Easily believe in that. It just seems to be the general best foreign policy idea is just, nations have interest and they should follow those to the best of their ability. And all these other people who have these much more different perspectives, like the neocons and other foreign policy establishments, are just...
Well, it's a juxtaposition of neocons and Congress, because you see, you have all these groups in Washington, Venezuelans, Cubans, all these minorities like Kurdish, Iranian monarchists, ones in India, the Taiwanese. Well, Taiwanese not so much, actually. That's but I'm sure there's many, many other of these minority interests that are getting tons and tons of money to influence policy and give lots of money to politicians. And then, of course, you have the military-industrial complex that's making money from this. Well, none of that is realism, so they all hate realism.
Yep.
No,
Gentlemen,
my thoughts are that it's just a different form of realism, the money-making aspect. It's so what you guys are calling realism is the collective interests of a nation is the coin of the realm, and then the other one is just a different form of realism, which is focused on on the individual profit of a relatively small group of individuals, but just as realistic.
Yeah, I do.
But if you're a country like Turkey, or any country, even if you're like Israel, there are certain things that Mersheimer does talk about, which a country doesn't want to be wiped off the map. They don't want to be conquered, and they don't want most of their population slaughtered, not because they love their population, most of the elites could care less, but because there are certain red lines. The Ukraine situation, especially 80 years after what happened the last time, and the centuries problems both with the British and the Germans, did not allow them to allow NATO on the borders of Russia. And I think that anybody that's not biased would probably see they probably have a point, being that 27 million got killed in the last war, which was only 80-something years ago. So that's very uncomfortable for, as you say, smaller groups, be they political groups, ethnic groups, monetary groups, even the militaries. Part of the problem in Israel that I've come to the conclusion, people have taught me, is that the IDF and the military people make a lot of money having a lot of countries to bomb. And, if Israel was to have peace tomorrow, it would be great for the intelligence agencies, but it would be awful for the IDF, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So let's continue here. So ISIS remnants and the logic of mobile assets. One of the most uncomfortable realities in modern warfare is that defeated actors are rarely eliminated. They are repurposed. I'm not even sure that that's modern warfare. Didn't that happen in ancient warfare? Spy guy.
What was that about ancient warfare?
He said, one of the most uncomfortable realities in modern warfare is that defeated actors are rarely eliminated. They are repurposed.
No. In ancient, Often what would happen is you would have a lot of maneuvering and then one giant big battle and a mass slaughter. And that was kind of the ancient warfare. And then you might repurpose whoever was left. Yes, definitely the Romans recruited a lot of what they called auxiliaries to be their supplement. So for a longest time, Roman didn't have cavalry elements for the legions. They would have their auxiliaries do that work until the Byzantines, for the most part, or later stages when.
All right, so let's continue here. Following the territorial collapse of the state of ISIS, there was a state. There really was a state with administration. I remember it, or Daesh, as they would like to call it. Intelligence assessments increasingly distinguished between locally rooted fighters and foreign, socially detached cadres. Now, by the way, where have we seen these foreign, socially detached cadres? Haven't we seen them in Ukraine for the last 2-3 years?
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely.
Gentlemen?
As Scott Ritter calls them, sheep-dipped soldiers brought in from other nations, or even the Russians call them mercenaries. I look them more like the freedom brigades of the Spanish Civil War era. But yeah.
6 of one, half a dozen of what is the expression? One man's freedom fighters, another man's
terrorist. Yeah.
Well, but whatever they are repurposed foreign, socially detached cadres, mercenaries that just, soldiers of fortune, or people that have an axe to grind against their own society, the system, and they go out and they do their thing, and they don't really have any understanding of what they're fighting for.
I think there's another category, exemplified by people like Ryan Routh.
Ryan who?
Routh.
Ryan Routh.
I don't know.
I believe that there are people who fall within those groups or fall within those categories who are being manipulated by intelligence agencies.
Yeah, he's the guy who tried to shoot Trump on the golf course.
I just thought he was a loony, but that's interesting. Okay.
No, he has this very weird background.
He has an extensive history recruiting. He has an extensive history recruiting mercenaries for Ukraine and for arms sales within Ukraine.
Yep. Not to mention, he was once arrested for having a fully automated, automatic rifle and a weapon of mass destruction, like a car bomb, and he was out. The charges were dismissed. Like, that doesn't happen in the States unless you have some sort of.
No. There's something is going on there.
Yeah, there was.
All right, let me continue here. So, coming back to these foreign detached cadres, the latter, stateless, mobile, and expendable, were no longer viewed solely as a threat, but as a variable. So that goes back to your point, saying in the old days we would wipe all these people off, but now all of a sudden they're a variable because we're going to proxy wars. It's like what Andrew Korobko wrote about, proxy wars and regime change. He calls it the adaptive method of regime change. Some were quietly redirected towards Afghanistan, opening a new theater beyond Levantine tribal constraints. Others remained in detention facilities, not merely as prisoners, but as latent leverage. Now, I never thought about that before, but did that actually start in Iraq during the Iraq War, where you have a valuable asset that's too dangerous to keep outside, but you keep them inside so they can be released later when needed? Is that something that historically has taken place, or that's more in our current century?
That's much more. Let me double check. I was looking at another screen for a second. So, no, that is definitely much more of a thing of this current age, where we're adopting our defeated adversaries and using them for more things. Like that's definitely much more a 20th century, 21st century technique.
So in the chaotic aftermath of Dr. Assad's collapse, exploratory discussions reportedly took place between Kurdish authorities and external intelligence actors regarding the controlled release and instrumentalization of select ISIS elements. The logic was brutal but coherent. Impose a coercive religious authority over Arab majority regions that could dominate through fear, yet remain fully dependent on Kurdish and, by extension, Israeli oversight.
Now, with
And I don't think
my penchant for oversimplification, I'll say that is just a recycling of what was a successful strategy in Lebanon.
well, but the idea was that you see governments have a hands-off situation when that happens.
Yeah,
So basically, ISIS is a coercive religious authority. We've seen other religious. That's how you get rid of. Pardon me.
Taliban.
I guess. Well, my observation is
Yes.
that just the coercive religious authority is the flavor of the day. In Lebanon, there was a religious aspect to it, but it was more independent warlords. But the net result, according to Mearsheimer anyway, the net result is the same.
Well, I would say even for me, the net result was Hezbollah.
Mhm.
Even though, basically they were Sunni. Lebanon was more of a Sunni country for a while, but it was so. Basically, this is very, very interesting. So you impose these authorities and create a lot of fear, but they are dependent. And actually, ISIS actually achieved a certain amount of independence for a while, didn't they?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, like
They got out of control.
Yeah, when they overran Mosul and took over, they were like suddenly everyone had to work together to get rid of them, including the United States and Iran and Israel. Well, not Israel. Israel was apparently on liked ISIS fighters a fair bit.
Well, okay, there's your confusion. Israel liked Jabhat al-Nusra, which is al-Sharar. Now, you bring up a very interesting point, because if you go on to Israeli and Jewish spaces, they associate Ahmed al-Sharar, or in those days, Muhammad al-Jalani in that time, as part of ISIS. He was fighting ISIS. Muhammad, basically, Jabhat al-Nusra is an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, which does not like the Muslim Brotherhood, but at the same time does not like Daesh or ISIS. So they don't like either one. They're all Islamic constructs, but there are very distinct differences between the constructs. Now I kind of understand why so many in the Jewish world equate al-Sharar with ISIS, because they kind of blend the two as the same, but the two are anything but the same. Why don't you lower the lower the article a little bit?
Yeah. You know what?
Raise the article. Yeah, there we go. Okay. I'll tell you when to stop. Okay, let's stop. Down one. Okay, stop. There was not a plan for peace, but for managed disorder, stability through calibrated extremism. Now, I've never really thought about calibrated extremism. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, like people are a targeted extremism. People are looking to encourage whoever is doing whatever is looking to increase certain types of tensions.
Okay, so
to promote a
so basically they wanted to keep this extremism, but what I think the author is saying is that there was a certain type of calibrated extremism to not create peace, but to maintain some modicum of stability. You can have no peace, but still have stability, as we saw in different aspects of the world wars. Correct?
Yep.
So crucially, such a system was viable only under the umbrella of an internationally protected Kurdish state. Without that protection, it collapsed under its own toxicity, which we saw, by the way, in the last week when the Syrian Arab Army just started moving east, and everything collapsed overnight without even a fight. So basically, where the Kurds benefited during this 10 years, and they were kind of not very smart about it, is that they amassed a fortune of 25 billion that should have been used if Barzani was running it. They could have, if it was run correctly, they could have made about 100 to 150 billion from all that oil and wheat. And that's what these proxies built in Raqqa and these places. Tunnels. Who else builds tunnels? Who else builds tunnels?
Well, the South Viet or the North Vietnamese did at one point.
I'm thinking more in the region of Hamas.
Oh, well, Hezbollah?
Hamas, no, Hezbollah built huge tunnels, but Hamas built 500 kilometers, longer than the London subway. So we're seeing a pattern of all these proxy groups. They all love to build tunnels.
Yeah.
Whether it's, like you said, but North Vietnamese was also, yeah, you're right. But if we take a look at Hamas, we look at YPG, PKK, and then we also look at Hezbollah. They all build tunnels. Now, why do they build these tunnels?
It's hard. It's hard to dig you out of the tunnels. It's tunnel fighting is much easier for the defender. There's a whole bunch of different reasons why, much in the way that trenches are good for the defender.
You protect your soldiers, and you protect from a famine, and you are able to sustain yourself for a couple of years.
Yeah, and you can pop out every so often and harass whoever you're fighting.
That's exactly the success of Hamas in Gaza, and by doing that, you then get a big publicity, public relations, and social media, and you make those that are trying to fight you or to get rid of your menace end up killing a lot more civilians, but no soldiers. So then you win in social media. Ever thought about that?
Oh yeah, that definitely makes sense. You can pretend you're the underdog and defend, and everyone loves the underdog. And you can spin the narrative that the other side is the oppressor. We're seeing the same thing happening right now in Minnesota. I've been talking to a number of people recently about a bunch of different things, and I pointed out to them that the whole of ICE enforcement in the United States is centered on Texas. It's like you go to the ICE website, and there's this glaring red blob of Texas, and then the next most important theater is the Louisiana, Georgia area, and then the states surrounding Illinois. Minnesota, despite all the action that's happening there and all the narrative that's coming out of there, is actually very low priority and has very few deportations compared to the rest of the thing. But we're seeing that, but because you have this large Antifa complement there, that's the real problem. They're having all this, and also all the fraud that's going on in that state, where the Democrats are basically, it reminds me so much of the Jim Crow South, except for yeah, it is. It's like you need to send in.
Where in Minnesota?
Yeah. The Twin Cities, all that. What they really need to do is, sadly, they're probably all dead, but find the old FBI agents who broke up the Klan in the 60s and ask them for tips on how to take out
things. Of course. Well, a lot of the people from the Klan just went into regular law enforcement.
Yep. And you're seeing the same thing.
And never died.
A lot of the people in there, all the judges, all the cops, all these people are letting people go because they've been co-opted, much in the way that the Klan did in Jim Crow South, where they were the cops and the judges and all that. So,
yeah, I mean, I think I know Gene Hackman just passed away, but the film Mississippi Burning really showed how everybody was part of it. So,
yeah, exactly. That's what's happening in Minnesota.
Well, there we go. So let me go back now and finish up the article. The sovereign counterstrike sealing the Iron Curtain. Now, I don't know why he calls this sealing the Iron Curtain. Regional states did not interpret these developments as a Kurdish matter. They saw these as a structural threat to sovereignty itself. Now, let me just stop right there and say that I'm a great fan that Syria should be a sovereign state. And the Israelis, for reasons we all know, are dreading that there is a true sovereign state in Syria. I think it would be the best thing that would happen to Israel, but they feel differently for reasons I can understand. So, an Israeli foothold embedded within eastern Syria, masked by proxies and malicious intermediaries. This is interesting. Masked by proxies and malicious intermediaries would have it irrevocably altered the regional balance of power. Well, if I was Bibi Netanyahu or Israel, I might want to alter the regional balance of power. I still think regional integration into the region of the majority is far better. But if you feel that the majority are all barbarians, then you probably do want to alter the regional balance of power. The response was swift, coordinated, and statist classic. Is that what he's saying? I can't read this. State-centric. So basically you're saying Israel kept thundering for a year that they want to break up Syria, as was done to Yugoslavia, but that means somehow Syria was smarter than Yugoslavia. They had a backing. This Yugoslavia didn't have Russia's backing. If Yugoslavia had had Russia's backing, or even Turkey's backing, there might have still been a Yugoslavia today.
Mm-hmm.
But there isn't.
There'll be a Yugoslavia in the future.
You see Yugoslavia coming back?
That was a big subject. You weren't here last week when I was talking to Warhound, but Warhound really thinks that Yugoslavia is on the road back to integration.
Well, I mean, look at this nonsense. I mean, they created this state, tiny little piece of land that they called North Macedonia, that the Greeks were furious with. But what it really is North Massacrap Natoville. It was literally a state that was created just to put NATO there. I mean, it's ludicrous.
Yep. No way.
The Warhound actually thinks Yugoslavia could come back.
Yeah, he pointed out that Croatia has formally apologized to Serbia for all the stuff they did during the 90s, a couple of years ago.
Well, look, this thing that just took place at the UN yesterday, where even Friedrich Merz, who I think is one of the worst, came out and said the European Union has failed. For somebody from one of the largest countries to say that, from the largest stakeholders, which is France and Germany, those are the two largest stakeholders. I think that even though Trump was hilarious, I thought it was wonderful in Greenland and this and that, and the new Gaza, Singapore. But what Merz said, could that be an arrow shot into the demise of the European Union as we know it today? That was pretty, or is it just a mea culpa to kick the can down the road? Maybe it's both.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's hard to say, but yeah, we had a very interesting discussion the last time. We even had Michael on for a while, so that was pretty good.
Oh, really? Well, you need to let me know next time. So,
well, you were.
I think Warhound would.
I put it in the chat, and Michael just turned up. I was like, "Oh, great! You got a third person here."
Okay, I think Warhound would like the one today because this is all kind of stuff he likes.
I think he's probably the person. We've had a consistent person watching, and he asked me to send him the link for today. So I think he has been the person who's been watching us today. We've been up to 4 people concurrent viewers, so that's pretty good for us. But last week,
did you ever think, maybe we need to get more viewers? But anyway, let me continue here. On land, military operations were executed under the banner of the now new Syrian Authority, which I approve of, by the way, explicitly backed by Turkish kinetic power. Now, let's just stop for a second here. When al-Sharar took power in Damascus, he begged Israel to come and work with him because he didn't want Turkey taking all of Syria over. And that is the reason that I believe that Israel could still have relations with Damascus, because al-Sharaa wants to be his own man. He doesn't want to be a Turkic proxy. But for some reason, the current Israeli government cannot countenance going in that direction, whereas I believe a new Israeli government could take that into consideration and greatly upgrade relations. I don't know what you think, but that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So, you know, so in thin air logistics domain, Iraq imposed a I can't read this. Iraq imposed a something total frontier shutdown.
Where are we?
Something into I can't read this. It's very imposed a near total border shutdown, severing intelligence corridors and resupply lines, ending the Kurdish project.
Yes, I got it here. On land, military operations were executed under the banner of the new Syrian Authority, explicitly backed by Turkish kinetic power in the air and logistics domain. Iraq imposed a near total border shutdown, severing intelligence corridors and supply lines feeding to the Kurdish project.
Now that becomes interesting because.
Well, I think we should read the next paragraph. They go together.
Oh,
okay, go ahead.
This was not improvisation. It was preemption, a collective move by Turkey, Iraq, and Iran to extinguish the Israeli variable before it could harden into a permanent geopolitical reality.
And read the last one, then we'll just read the last sentence. And then we'll
Sure. What was defended was not a regime, but a principle, sovereign equality over proxy fragmentation.
Well, there you go. That is the essence of the entire Israeli zeitgeist for the Middle East, which is to have proxy fragmentation completely in Syria,
and that's
if
why
possible,
I drew the parallel
Iraq.
to Lebanon, because that's how I described the Israeli strategy for handling Lebanon back in the day.
All right. Now, I'm not going to say that that is not a valid quest for the Israelis, but I would say simultaneously that it is a myopic quest. Would you say that would be a fair statement?
Well, I would say probably the same thing, but very differently. I would say that I've always one of the things that has depressed me for decades was the effectiveness of that strategy from the Israeli point of view.
I don't think it's effective at all. But let's turn this into a positive. Where in history has this kind of proxy strategy really, really worked? Remember that I always try to tell people, and they don't catch on it, these were the proxies that were used to divide Germany in the Diktat of Versailles. And it worked for 20 years.
I don't think Lebanon has ever been the threat to Israel that it once was since that time. I think it was.
No, but
I think it was unfortunately very effective from the Israeli point of view.
Yeah.
Well, it was effective, but it's so basically Israel is petrified of having a real state on its border. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, I think you could say, or let me rephrase that. I don't know if I would say it that way. What I would say is that Israel has been trained, if you will, through circumstance to reach, to a carpenter with a hammer, the world is a nail. So this is Israel's hammer.
Yes, but I tend to think that Israel would be far better off achieving some type of regional integration.
Of course.
Remember that you have another state in the region which does the same thing, and they're getting into trouble now, and that's the Emirates, with Sudan, with Libya, with southern Yemen, Somaliland. They're also running into equal problems.
No, I don't disagree with you in terms of what could be better. I'm just making a statement of fact, which is I can understand why, from the Israeli point of view, this is the hammer that they adopted.
Well, yeah, I wish it would change, but it won't happen with this government. And the only way to change it, in my opinion, and this is what gets people hurt, I think only the United States has enough leverage to try to force a change of direction. I'm not saying they can change what Israel does, what Saudi Arabia does, but they can try to nudge or force a change of direction.
Or,
And in this respect,
alternatively, they could just stay out of the way while the Israeli citizens did it.
No, because Israeli citizens right now are you missed the first part of our conversation, are under great trauma. The whole Jewish world is under great trauma.
No, I get that. I mean, yes, it wouldn't be tomorrow. I agree.
I would say that the whole world, not so much because of October 7th, but because of all the anti-Semitism around the world, they've actually are under a worse trauma than probably in the late 1930s. I've never seen, this is a trauma which it's you cannot override it. You cannot talk region. The trauma is so great that you have to just give time for the trauma to hopefully recede.
Exactly. I agree with you 100% there. And my point simply is that if we agree that it's going to take that time, then a proactive posture on the part of the U.S. may or may not be helpful or productive. It may simply be just a question of staying out of the way while the Israeli, citizenship eventually wends its way towards a different position and adopts a different government.
Yeah,
the U.S. does not have a stellar
the
U.S. does not have a stellar track record for intervention. Let's just say that.
But we have a different type of administration right now, and I actually believe that because of this tremendous trauma that the Jewish people are under, that the Trump administration is working to save Israel and the wider diaspora from itself. They have to overcome this trauma, and the way to do it,
from what I can tell, that is not what the Trump administration sadly is doing.
No, but I think indirectly, if they can create the Gaza Singapore,
that kind of stuff might work. The problem
if they can force Israel into the Gulf, if they can make a relation between Israel and Syria, that's how when better things start happening.
Anti-Semitism happen in the States, especially attacking anyone who criticizes Israel. Having Ron DeSantis the governor of Florida, fly to Israel and sign legislation that will put people who criticize Israel in prison in Florida, making that a state.
No, yeah, I know it's very bad. I mean, but I'm talking about in their foreign policy, the best way to overcome all this, in my humble opinion, is for Israel to begin the process of integrating into the region while simultaneously working with other stakeholders to start crushing the worst jihadi insurgents groups. Those are.
And do we agree that that's a generation away at least?
Yeah.
But it's more than a generation unless we work on it now.
Well, for me, I would say the real solution to that kind of situation is the fact that you have the entire government, from what I can tell, is a bunch of boomers. And until they shuffle off their mortal coil and make way for younger blood, this is a problem I see with a lot of the world, is that we're not letting the young Gen X or even the millennials into power. The boomers are just clinging on forever. Like BB Net, he's in his 90s? Come on, guys.
But he's about 78, 79. Same with Erdogan. But still, Erdogan is the same thing.
Everyone needs to retire at 75 and let new people come in.
I agree. But you see, there is a problem, though, in the generational shift, and that's Gen Z. Because Gen Z in the cycle, and you'll see this in London, you're seeing this in Belgium, you're seeing it in Israel, you're seeing it everywhere, are much more violent. They want mass deportations, and a lot of violence. If you listen in Israel to Amichai Chikli, for example, we agree entirely on Europe. We support people like Connor Tomlinson and groups like Le Pen and all this. But when it comes to the Middle East, he has such a hatred for Arabs and I'm afraid that the younger generation, the Gen Z generation in the West, and also in the Near East, could be a very violent
if you're
generation.
If you're worried about Gen Z, where do you meet Gen Alpha?
Oh yeah.
You ain't
Gen
seen
Alpha.
nothing. Oh yeah, you ain't seen nothing.
Yeah.
Is there a Gen Alpha out there?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I have a couple. One guy who said to me, he was talking about another Jewish guy that we both know, and he said, "Look, we're going to tell these. It's going to come a day where we're going to go to these people and say, Israel or America, make a choice. And if you say Israel, you'll be on a plane."
I'll tell you what worries me about that. There is a move in the Plan B business, which I dabble in, but I don't really do any business, to stop allowing dual passports, dual citizenry. It's not going to happen right now, but you see that hyper nationalist move is out there, and that hyper nationalist move is moving forward. So, it's like, do it now, because I think a few years from now, there's a lot of doors that are going to close.
Yep.
I agree.
Let me finish this up. Let me finish this up.
Just to wrap that up, Gen Alpha is they're turning 25 now. They can't be ignored.
And you think they're even worse? Well, that's where all the trad monarchists and a lot of the kind of troubling stuff that we're hearing is probably coming from, not people even in their 30s.
Yep.
But yeah. So, all right. At this juncture, Washington made the only choice available to an empire under constraint: reprioritization. Preserving the Kurdish state project risked a multi-front convergence. Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and Syria aligned against continued American presence. That outcome would have rendered any Iran strategy untenable. By quietly pressuring Israel to disengage from the Kurdish eastern flank, Washington narrowed the battlefield. The message was implicit but unmistakable. The Iran file supersedes all others. And of course, with Captain Behab, I would say probably he thinks the same. Wouldn't you say so?
Yep.
Captain Behab, would you lower the rest of it to the end of the article?
Okay.
And by the way, what do you think of the great phantom whale instead of the great white whale?
Okay, there we go. The great phantom whale. That's what I think it is. It is a phantom whale.
I knew you'd like it.
Yeah, the great phantom whale. Okay. So we have Captain Ahab and the great white whale, and now we have Captain Behab and the great phantom whale. So, except that the Captain Behab was never demasted. Okay. Whether the coming phase produces a comprehensive grand bargain with Tehran on escalation or upon open confrontation, one really is now fixed. The United States cannot afford to remain entangled in a peripheral proxy war while the central strategic something remained unresolved. Central strategic what? Read for me. While the central strategic contest remained unresolved,
Okay, I'll just start from the top and we'll let you comment. At this juncture, Washington made the only choice available to an empire under constraint: reprioritization. Preserving the Kurdish state project risked a multi-front convergence. Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and Syria aligned against continued American presence. That outcome would have been rendered any Iran strategy untenable. By quietly pressuring Israel to disengage from the Kurdish eastern flank, Washington narrowed the battlefield. The message was implicit but unmistakable. The Iran file supersedes all others. Whether the coming phase produces a comprehensive grand bargain with Tehran or escalates toward open confrontation, one reality is now fixed. The United States could not afford to remain entangled in a peripheral proxy war while the central strategic contest remained unresolved.
Okay, let's stop for just a second there.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that what the author is saying is that Iran is the main focus of the main raison d'etre. So my question is that influenced by Israel, or is that the United States coming with its own priorities against, let's say, Belt and Road or something else?
Yeah. Well, no, I think this Iran was that they wanted America's interested primarily in Iran, and they're going to do stuff to mess with Iran. So they wanted to stop distractions.
So here's a question.
But are they interested in Iran because of Bibi's never-ending Don Quixote stuff?
Yeah, there's other stuff.
That's my, before you answer, let me add an additional dimension to that question.
Mm-hmm.
Considering that we all three probably agree that the Trump administration means it when they talk about narrowing to spheres of influence, that being the case, why are they still messing around in Iran?
Yep.
Well, I could give you the answer to that. Basically, they want to go back to spheres of influence. You notice yesterday after Davos, the biggest players, by the way, all Jewish, like me, went to Moscow with a lot of fanfare. Notice you had these huge motorcades in Moscow and leaving Moscow to go to Abu Dhabi. He is definitely interested in spheres of influence. That's why he invited the Russian president to be on the board of Gaza. He wants spheres of influence, and I think it's an economic imperative. I think that he understands it's necessary. I think the economy can no longer. He wants to devalue the dollar. It's terrible for me as an outsider. It's probably terrible for Money Circus, but it's probably terrible for Michael if he's living abroad. That's why he probably comes back to Canada. And we could see Canada breaking up in the next 5 or 6 years. You could see the 3 Midwestern provinces joining the U.S. I think, in fact, I think.
Oh, I don't think they'll join the U.S. No. They're not going to join the U.S. And the reason why is, why would you give up their main number one reason why they want to split off is to do economic development. Why would you want to join up the trade Ottawa for the IRS?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, basically, I think that the 3 Midwest and probably Quebec also are looking at Ottawa and saying, that's the British. We want to break away from the British in Ottawa. That more than the U.S. or anything else.
Perspective these days, Quebec is all about, like, we can drain these. They have the Minnesota perspective of, like, we can drain Ottawa for all it's worth. Versus that's their kind of viewpoint now. But the West, I just don't see that the Western provinces would want to give up one master for another.
I would see that the Western provinces might not exactly do that, but they would align very closely.
Oh yeah, they'll be
the Midwest. Remember, it was none other than Doug Casey that said a year ago that he could see within 20 years the entire Midwest breaking off both from Washington and from Ottawa and creating a whole different state, reaching from, I guess, up there in the Northwest Territories or Yukon or all that, all the way down to Chihuahua. And Durango. And I mean, I know that sounds a little far-fetched, but demographically, that whole Midwest area, farming area, cattle area, could become one country. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could happen. Or do you think that that's really off the rocker?
I don't know in 20 years, but I can see that happening one day.
Let's finish up the article. Now, so again, I see why Iran is because basically Trump wants to finish unfinished business. And that is what Ambassador David Friedman, by the way, said from the first Trump administration. What Trump wants to do is to take Israel, put it with the Gulf, and let them run themselves. And that's what I believe in.
Yep.
And to do that, you need to have a stable Syria and a stable Egypt, and preferably a stable Iraq. That's my thought. Now, again, I don't know why it's such a crime to say something like that, but apparently it is. So, to say that makes you a heretic. It's really quite amusing. Read the rest of the article, okay?
Yep. The Syrian-Iraqi-Turkish border crisis offers a stark lesson in great power politics. No proxy is permanent and no alliance is sacred. The Kurds were not abandoned. They were mortized, their value fully extracted, their protection withdrawn once the cost exceeded the return. Israel, for its part, misjudged the tolerance of sovereign regional actors for indirect expansion. The headlines have moved on, but the implications endure. The era of disguising geopolitical re-engineering behind ISIS remnants and Syrian chaos is closing. The board has been cleared. What remains is the end game. Iran is no longer a background variable. It is the board itself.
For me, I think this is one of the best articles I've seen on this subject, period. I really do. I think it's a fantastic article. I will get your thoughts, everybody.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I haven't really thought too much of the Kurds in a while. But yeah, the Kurds always do seem to get kind of the short end of the stick. But they always set themselves up.
I think that's a different discussion. I think their own flaws. Because they have the same. Okay, the Kurds they're huge. They're not like the Israelis. They're huge. But every time they've had a chance to have a state, they haven't taken it. A little bit like the Palestinians. They have a state right now in Erbil. They have a state. And they have not taken that state. And I believe, and by the way, I believe they had a state around the time of Mossadegh. There was at the end of World War II, they had for 2-3 years a Kurdish state, and it disintegrated. And I think we need to look at that someday, or they need to look at it and discuss why. That's the end of my Middle East discussion.
Okay. Well, I was hoping we could talk a little bit about what happened in the World Economic Forum today, but
well, just to finish about what do I think of the Mearsheimer article? I think that it's basically a restating of Kissinger's maxim and the P.T. Barnum maxim. It's a combination of it's more dangerous to be America's friend and there's one born every minute. I'm constantly astonished. Way back in 2021, I was astonished that anyone in Ukraine was listening to the American intelligence agencies. And I remain astonished that anyone ever does. It's truly astonishing to me that anyone could possibly fall for that. But there's one born every minute. That's all I have to say about that. Apparently this will go on for all of eternity unless somebody cleans out that rat nest.
Yep, that's unfortunately the direction of travel in that particular region of the world. But I'll just do that instead. I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. Oh, and Dave drops off unceremoniously.
Well, was it something I said?
Yeah, probably. What did you make of Trump's emergence at the WEF?
I wasn't. I really didn't think too much of it, except just for me, it was just a massive power play, a massive power flex. I'm going to go on about how great I am, and you're going to shut up and listen to me.
Yeah, that's kind of the simple way of looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm a simpleton. I always tell that to people. I always say that. I'm a simpleton, and I have a simplistic way of looking at things, and that's how I was, David. I was saying that Trump's performance at the WEF was simply power play. I'm going to go on about how
I
great I
loved
am
it.
for.
I
Yeah,
loved it. I thought it was total macho. I thought it
yeah,
was
exactly.
macho,
Uh,
macho to
I'm
end
gonna
all
I'm gonna
machos. And we, I,
I'm gonna go on for
I
90
think he
minutes about how great
redefined
I
it.
am, and you're going to shut up and listen.
Yeah.
I
So,
thought it was fantastic. If you look at what I posted earlier today, a cartoon about that, I mean, I am pissing on everybody. I think the guy has established himself, whether you like him or not, as an ultimate macho.
Yeah.
I
No,
just think it was wonderful.
yeah, no, for me, I've been on this other group recently, and I have been dealing with some American leftists, and they were just like, I just don't get Trump, and I don't get the appeal. And I'm like, well, you brought in tens of millions of Latin Americans into your country, and you're shocked they would elect a Latin American president. Because if you look at Bolsonaro,
But I love,
Maduro,
I see, I love macho. I love macho leaders. I love strongmen. Look at the people I like. Everybody I like is a strongman.
mhm.
I don't like weak-kneed corporate beta so-called democratic nonsense. I think the guy is
we do
absolutely.
know that we do know that is that's the way you roll.
What do you mean?
Well, us guys, at least David and I, we know that you love the machos.
Yep.
Yeah, and Trump is absolutely. I will even go so far as to say that in our time right now, he's redefined the word macho.
Now, let me ask you, because at one point when we were talking about your love for machos, I mentioned something about Carl Schmitt. Have you had the chance to catch up on any Carl Schmitt?
I have a new travel project that I'm doing, and I had my clients over in two countries, one of which you can probably guess, and the other one you won't guess. Uh, and I've been really monitoring them and working with them the whole time. And I was supposed to go to Egypt next week, but it got canceled because Ramadan is coming. Then the people are coming, so I've been a little bit discombobulated. But I should really look him up because I've heard the name and I still don't. I mean, does he really get into the whole macho thing?
Well, he's all about the unbounded executive.
And I believe that that's good. I like
Well,
that.
that's why you might well be in total agreement with his philosophy. I'm curious. He was a
Yeah, I mean,
philosopher in New
I
Jersey.
am very, very contemptuous of modern um, bureaucrats that have no brains. And the whole concept of democracy is nothing more than rule by consent for the elites. And then we put in these puppets to basically remind the sheep that you consented to have us rule over you. I mean, I always go by the maxim that a leader is not called upon to lead, he leads.
Hmm. Well, I get you. I mean, I don't disagree with anything you said per se, but I still have hope for the American project. I still have hope for the separation of powers.
Well, kind of, but I think what happened, which was fun at the World Economic Forum, was how Carney really got lambasted. I mean, that guy, he is actually the biggest danger to the U.S. is Mark Carney.
Mm.
In what way?
China.
Sorry? Oh, China. Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's already happened. So, uh,
Very similar to Trudeau.
yeah, no, I mean, what more could happen that hasn't already happened?
Mm.
Well, he's going to try to cut the U.S. out, but basically hasn't been that isn't this the revenge of the British for a while against the U.S. that Farage was there, and the whole idea of Brexit, which I thought was wonderful. I loved it because
Mm.
I don't think there's anything in the political world I despise more than the European Union.
Yeah.
And um, the rug was pulled out from under Farage by the arrival of Biden. And so the great American alliance, which would have propped up for England to get the benefit of Brexit, just faded away.
Well, they're still going. They still have a lot of the benefits of Brexit. They haven't been able
Yeah,
to
but
take
they're
away the
insisting, but they want to get back into the horrors of Brussels, even though
yeah, no,
everybody said yesterday that Brussels, failed.
Yeah.
Here's the technical question: is the Human Rights Court technically part of the EU, or is it separate?
I don't really know the answer. And look, if you'll notice, Bibi Netanyahu was not able to come yesterday because of this ridiculous ICC warrant. And then you have the funniest moment, I think, of the whole economic forum was when Trump basically started talking about macaroons, sunglasses or aviator glasses. I mean, maybe Bridget Toe or whatever gave him a sock to an eye. Who knows? But I think it was really funny.
Yep. No, it really was, as Tom Luongo said, he was going there to give them their terms of surrender. But yeah, and they caved on Greenland almost immediately.
I got the answer. And David, this is something you should look into, because maybe you have something that you can now hate more than the EU.
I don't think there's anything I can hate more than the EU, but go ahead.
The European Court of Human Rights, the Strasbourg Court, is not part of the EU. It's a institution of the Council of Europe. And I will tell you that right now, what constrains UK autonomy more than any lingering affiliation with the EU is that they're a signatory to the Human Rights Convention of the ECTHR. And their hands are tied legally because of that. And they're conceivably more insidious and perfidious than the EU.
Yeah, they are. I do know that Dominic Cummings came out on a podcast a year or two ago, and he basically explained what was going on when he was governor with Boris. And he said the number one thing that we had to do was get out of this stupid court. If we could do that, we could fix so many of our problems. But because we were allowed ourselves to be tied to this, and I kept telling Boris we need to get out. But Boris was listening to now we know what the recent conservative defector, I can't remember his name, but he's married to an Israeli Jew, and he came out and said all these conservative cabinet ministers were making fun, and Boris completely brought in the Boris wave so he could pay as a payoff to donors who were wanting cheap labor, and the housing donors, which is
I think right away it's not the Human Rights Court. The other thing that needs to go is the ICC. That absolutely has to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All that does is beat up on third world countries or Yugoslavia or Israel or whatever. I mean, it's basically it's an enforcement arm of Brussels.
Mm-hmm.
So Brussels needs to go. The ICC needs to go. The ICJ needs to go. The human rights courts. These are all kangaroo courts, and they all need to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gentlemen, I need to sign off.
Okay.
But why don't you let me know a little bit more ahead of time, and I will join. I'll try to join again next week. Maybe we'll have Warhound on. Let's say this has been a very, very interesting week. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
indeed. Mm-hmm. And I'll leave you with a parting thought about Generation Alpha, which is that. Oh, wait a minute! I had it and I lost it. Mm-hmm. So I'll save it for next time.
Yeah. And anyways,
guys, I think we can all agree on one thing: Trump is a macho.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I think this.
If I would appreciate if you two guys would put this out on your socials and let people get to maybe spread the word so that more people can watch us and share.
Even though I'm scratching my head too much. All right, I'll do it. Okay. And we'll talk later. Everybody have a great day. Take care.
Listen, actually, David, if you put the word out, I was going to say, if he puts the word out on his socials, you could maybe collect a gigantic audience just based on hate watching.
Yeah, that would be true. We would have a fascinating chat of people like us hating on Dave.
All right. Well, unless there's something else, I'll sign off too.
Yep, sounds good. Good seeing you again, Wasserman.
I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. And with that was another conclusion, an interesting episode of the Geopolitics Today panel. I need to start doing more content again. I've been really allowing myself to get sucked up onto some other stuff that's interesting, but really supporting another guy's channel, not my own. What I'm going to say is, if you like this kind of stuff, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I appreciate if you could share more, because we have these very interesting discussions, but we don't have like any audience to do it. But I think we add to the conversation, because unlike a lot of the other channels out there, we're not anti-America, we're not anti-Israel, we're not anti-Canada, we're anti the EU. That's the one thing we can't agree upon. But just, I feel a lot of the other channels that used to be pretty good have allowed themselves to be audience captured into promoting self-hatred. And that's what I'd like to see more of us, as get out there and do more. So bye-bye. End stream.